This we are, we are starting a new book, the book of Shemot, which is the second of the 5 books of Moses. Chumash, which is usually titled, comes from the word in Hebrew chamesh, which means 5. Since we have 5 books, Bereshit, Shemot, Vayikra, Bamidbar, Dvarim, Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And we just finished last Shabbat the book of Genesis, the book of Bereshit. So we are starting a new Parsha, a new book, the book of Shemot, which we can find in the Chumashim that we are actually using here, is page 330, or chapter 1 in the book of Shemot. The book of Shemot is also referred to by our earlier sages. Nachmanides writes it very clearly. It's called the book of the redemption, Sefer HaGeula. Maybe that's why in English they call it the book of Exodus, even though it's Exodus refers to the specific Exodus, the Exodus from Egypt. Shalom Avichil. The Exodus from Egypt, but it's not only the Exodus from Egypt, but it's all types of redemptions, Geula, in every type of Exodus, including the movie Exodus. All Exodus is part of this process called redemption. You're being redeemed. So the Parsha is a Parsha which, before being redeemed, the Parsha is going to get into discuss the experience of the very bitter enslavement of exile, the Egyptian exile, Galut Mitzrayim. And then we're going to move on to the birth of the one who is later becoming responsible for that exodus. And this is Moses. We're going to learn about the birth of Moses in this Parsha. It's all part of the story, the way he was born and how he was raised and what he did once growing up leads him to be the Redeemer in the next few weeks, the next Parshiyot, including in this week's Parsha. It's going to involve a story of Moshe needing to flee Egypt to a place called Midian, where he ends up finding his wife, Zipporah, and he marries her. And finally, in this parsha, Moshe is being assigned the mission to become the Redeemer. So this is a very exciting parsha, perhaps, if we're going to say. It's a very exciting book. A lot is happening. Prince of Egypt, Exodus, you name it, it's all there. So we're going to concentrate on one topic, as we always try to do on the Wednesday night classes, not to get too mished, not to get too involved and confused with so many different topics, because every verse, every word, every concept, every topic deserves its own discussion, which I would like to discuss tonight. In English, perhaps the word would be empathy, which I would say it in other words, to get into someone else's shoes, not only to assist them. And that's going to be the topic of discussion. But let me start with a story. A story tells it too. The entire Chumash started with a story. The book of Bereshit is a story, the story of creation. This is a story about the Rebbe Marash, the fourth Lubavitcher Rebbe, which his name was Reb Shmuel. In the called the Marash, which is the acronym, the abbreviation of the words Moreno Arab Reb Shmuel. He was like I said, he was the fourth of the 7 Rebbes of Chabad. So he had a chassid from the city of Chernigiv. Chernigiv is in Ukraine. The chassid's name was a famous chassid with the name of Reb David Tzvi Chain. His last name was Chain. Very famous chassid from a very large Hasidic family. The Chain family was a very large Hasidic family. And like by Hasidim, which even though this David Tzvi was a tremendous giant in Torah, and he was the rabbi of Chernigiv, which is not a small town, Chernigiv, and yet they called them Herschel Chernigiver. Herschel is Tzvi from the city of Chernigiv. And Herschel Chernigiver came to visit the Rebbe Marash. And he came, and what happened when he arrived, he was delayed. The train came late, the transportation was late. Somehow he made it late, where the Rebbe already finished accepting private audience. The Rebbe had a set of time. Wasn't the whole day you call, text, and message, and expect an answer immediately. There was a time frame, even by our Rebbe. There was always a time when people came in for a private audience, and then when the Rebbe was by himself, and the Rebbe was praying and studying, etc. But he came late, but he needed an answer. He came for a reason, so he decided he's going to wait in the hallway. The Rebbe is going to leave his room on his way home. He's going to go over and ask for his so-called, for his particular need. And as he's waiting, the Rebbe's Gabbai is walking out with a set of garments, a undershirt, a shirt, and he was carrying it out after he brought in a different set for the Rebbe to change. Because the Rebbe's clothes used to get literally soaked, wet, during those private audiences, Yechidut. And that Gabbai somehow felt very comfortable, and he turns to Reb Herschel of Chernigev, and he says, maybe you know why is the Rebbe sweating so hard? What is it doing in that Yechidut, in that private audience, that it causes them to sweat? Especially today, he only took in people 1 hour. Herschel doesn't say anything, and he says again, Rabbi Nishalaylam, Master of the world, for what reason is the Rebbe sweating so much? And as he finishes saying, the door of the Rebbe opens up, and he turns to his Gabbai and says, listen, you're going to go home. I'm going to continue paying your salary, but you're not working for me anymore. I think, the fact that you are relating the changing of clothes and getting into the, publicizing my private affairs, I'm not going to stop paying you. I know you have a family, and I'm not firing you, but the job to be in the room and to involve and bring people in and out. This, I guess, the idea here, it doesn't say, but I guess secrecy is the most important value in such a position of being in the presence of a Rebbe. But I will tell you, he says the Rebbe, let me explain you about this sweating. You're asking, why am I sweating so much? So it says like this. In an hour tonight, we saw 25 people came in a private audience. Let me explain you. Every time someone comes into me, I need to get into his shoes. I need to get into his mindset. I need to get into his process, to his life. He doesn't want to also hear from me the way I am for myself. He wants me to identify with that. So once sharing with me the information, whatever he relates, I need to be fully present in this person's life. At the same time, he wants my advice. I can't give him my advice while I'm enveloped in his clothes. I got to remove his clothes and not put back my clothes. Meaning my thoughts, my process, my identity. So if you're talking about one person undressed and dressed, 25 people, so it took me 50 times to get undressed and dressed. So you're asking why I was sweating? That was the response. Let me see it in the Parsha a little. In this week's Parsha, in the midst of the very difficult decree of Pharaoh, and his decree was very clear when he realized that the Jewish people are growing. And what does he say? Very simple. He says that every Jewish child who is being born should be thrown in to the Nile River. That was the decree. You see on verse 22, page 332, Vayitzaf Paroi lechol amoy leimer. Paroi commanded all his people, saying, Kol haben hayiloid ayoiro tashlichu. Every son who is born, you shall cast into the Nile. V'chol habaste chayu, and every daughter you shall allow to leave. According to many commentaries, according to the Targum Onkelos, it wasn't even only to the Jews. When it says that Paro commanded all his people, saying that every son who is born shall be thrown into the river, in his decree, here you see the cruelty of an evil dictator. In his mind, it's not only the Jews, because he didn't know who he is, maybe hiding himself as Jewish and who is talking not Jewish. He knew one thing. He learned from his people and astrology in whatever way was discovered to him that there is a redeemer who is meant to be born, is a boy, and that's the one you should be scared of. So what am I doing? I got to get rid of all boys. That's the only option I have. And that was the decree. And during this very evil decree, with kids are being thrown into the Nile River, that was the method of getting rid of the young children. During this decree, baby Moshe was born at the very same time. His mother is trying to hide him, protect him, and it passes 3 months. At that point, she realizes there's no more option. And she creates the famous basket made out of reeds. And she creates it and fashions it in a way that the little baby should not be affected by the smell of the tar. That's why the tar is outside. And inside, I guess, there is something else. And the Torah goes in clay. And verse 3 in chapter 2, you see the exact description of that what the Torah calls Tevas Goime. Goime means reed, a reed basket. A reed basket, very specific basket. Moshe is now placed in the basket. This birth of Moshe did not happen naturally. What do you mean did not happen naturally? If you look on verse 1 in chapter 2, the Torah talks about a man of the house of Levi went and took, and in the English you see, in parentheses, remarried a daughter of Levi. What is the remarriage? Rashi quotes the Talmud, but the Gemara says that Moshe's father, his name was Amram, and his mother, which her name was Yocheved. Both of those people, a married couple, which were already blessed with 2 children. One, his name was Aaron, and another girl, which her name was Miriam. Amram decided, due to the situation in Egypt, the evil decrees, especially against having children, he doesn't find it reasonable to remain married to his wife. I guess you have a wife in order to build a family. You're going to be as a husband and wife and have a child, and then the child is going to be thrown into the Nile River. And if I have a daughter, she's not going to have any Jewish boy to marry. She's going to have to marry a Shegetz, which is, again, a part of the problem. What's the point of raising a daughter that you can't find them a husband in the future because there's no more Jewish boys left in the world? So he decided, in that case, let's say goodbye. Amram says goodbye to Yocheved. Yocheved says goodbye to Amram. And each one goes to their merry life. Says the Talmud that the daughter of Amram came over and she rebuked her father for his behavior, arguing with him also rationally. The Talmud. The Talmud mentions some of the arguments. One argument was that you are worse than Pharaoh. Pharaoh decreed against boys, you decrees against boys and girls by not having children with mom. A second argument was that Pharaoh's decree at least allows a child to be born, then he can merit at least the world to come once he is born. But if he's never born, then he doesn't have that opportunity either. And he's convinced by his young daughter's arguments, which according to some traditions, she was 6 years old. And she decides to get married again, remarried, renewing their vows. And from that new marriage is where the birth of Moses came about. That's why the Torah begins, Vayelech ish mi beis Levi, vayikach es bas Levi. A man of the house of Levi, referring to Amram, remarried his wife, which she was also a daughter of Levi. Yocheved was also a Levite. So now Amram is born, and is 3 months old and is being placed into the Nile River. What happens next? That's what I want to emphasize. I want to learn tonight. Verse number 4 says the Torah, Vateisat Tzav, Vateisat Tzav, Achoisoi Merochoik, his sister stood from afar, Ledeo, in order to know, Ma Yeose Loi, what will happen to him? This is what Miriam does. To know what will happen to him. You will read the simple reading of that verse, and what do we understand? She was just curious to know what's going to happen. Curiosity, standing and watching. Obviously, it wasn't curiosity. She understands that in the present situation, she cannot do nothing to save her brother. There's nothing she can do. She cannot do anything to cancel the decree of Pharaoh. Obviously not. If an Egyptian arrives, she's not going to be able to fight him or to overcome him. She understands that too. If there would be any solution, perhaps her mother, Yocheved, would have already acted to utilize that solution. Though there is no solution. So if there is no solution, what is she doing? She's coming and she chooses, as the Torah says, Ledeo, to know Ma Yeoseloi. Which means, as commentaries explain, she had not 1% of idea or any option or any consideration to save a brother. Nothing. She knows in her mind that there is no option for me. However, one other thing she knows, to leave Moshe alone is not an option. I'm not letting him be there alone. I can't help him. I can do nothing for him, but I'm going to stand from afar. As the Torah says, she couldn't even be close. But she kept the eye contact with the basket, remaining positioned in the area where she is standing from afar, Meirachok, and she decided, and she chose to what we call being present in his situation. You are stuck, I am stuck. I'm not going to go home and pretend that, what should I do? So at least I'm home and continuing with supper, with making the dishes, and playing rope with my friends. If you are in the river, if you are not able to be protected, even though I can protect you, I am here. I'm keeping an eye on you. In Russian, they say, Yan Yeznaya. What can you do? Lo yodea. I don't know what I can do. I can do nothing. But to live is not an option. To let Moshe alone in the basket just because that's what we did is not an option. I am present. I am standing here. She also, according to the Talmud, she prophesied to Amram that he's going to be the Redeemer. And I guess she's also standing there knowing that something good is going to happen. How, she doesn't know. But she is standing. Maybe the word standing means usually vaytityatzeb, that Hebrew word represents standing with conviction, not just standing maybe yes, maybe not. Atem nitzavim, right? Nitzavim always means standing with strength, with conviction, with force. She's standing fast on the ground. Something good is going to happen, even though merachok, it's from far, meaning it doesn't seem that there is a solution here, or the solution or the survival of her brother seems something so far, so distant, so unreal. But she's standing there. Something has to happen. So this is the story of the Parsha. How far that story and you're standing there accomplished something, we're only finding out 3 books later. Where did we find it? In the story of Miriam becoming Metzorat. Then we're going to come later in Parsha Ba'aloischa, which is in the book of Bamidbar. Miriam has a conversation. This is already after Moshe is becoming the big rebel and the Redeemer, and the Torah is given, and they are traveling to the desert. And Moshe is Moshe. Moshe is the real man. And Miriam is the sister who really was always for him, ends up having a conversation with your brother Aaron. And the conversation goes about the fact that Moshe's wife doesn't seem too happy by the fact that her husband is always busy with God. And it doesn't give her the love and attention that a woman wants. Even though she wasn't saying it in a way of bad-mouthing Moshe, she was talking to your brother, I guess, more in a way, how can we help Zipporah? Maybe we should, Moshe is right, obviously, he has to be busy with God, but maybe we can invite her more for supper, we can go out to a movie with her, I don't know. We have to try to do something with Zipporah. But yet, for the level of who Miriam was, it was considered slander, it was considered Lashon Hara. And God got very upset. As the story, those who remember, Parsha Ba'aloischa, he invited to come back later in June, and we're going to read it, that she becomes leprous, she becomes a Metzorat. And what happens then? She remains isolated outside of the Jewish camp. For how long? 7 days. 7 days. What happens during the 7 days while she's in isolation? The Torah says that nobody left. Ve'a'am lo nasa ad eyosef Miriam. The people chose not to leave until Miriam's recovery. You want to look it up? It's on page 880 in your book. This is the last one of the one before the last verse in Ba'aloischa, page 880. Vatisogen Miriam bechutz lamachan yeshivas yomim. Miriam was quarantined outside the camp for 7 days. Everybody knows what quarantine means these days, right? Ve'a'am lo nasa, and the people did not travel until Miriam was brought back. And the Talmud says, Zeh kavod chilak la kasuv. You know why Miriam was honored? Nobody to live. There was to pay back for the amount of time that she waited by your brother's basket, not leaving home. God returned a reward for Miriam, letting the nation be inspired. There was no commandment not to leave. There was the people were inspired. How can we leave? Miriam is in quarantine. Now, The Rebbe points out something amazing. The Rebbe says, let's analyze it for a second. So it's a long talk of the Rebbe, but I'm just going to bring out the point. The Rebbe says, let's analyze for a second. If Miriam remains quarantined, would the people live here by yourself in a dangerous desert? It wouldn't have happened. You're not letting a Jew to be endangered by leaving him alone in the desert. So there's no question that Miriam wouldn't have remained isolated without any people protecting her. What really was the reward of the people? The reward of the people, well, it's separating me and the reward. The reward of the people was, listen to that, in order for a Metzora, in order for a Metzora to go through the proper ritual of isolation, the Torah says he needs to do it outside of the Jewish camp. Michutz lamachane moshova. So there is a Jewish camp, and the Metzora needs to be outside of the camp. If the people continue traveling with Miriam alongside with them, would she be able to achieve her purity? No. A part of the process is, like God says, she needs to be outside of the camp. So for Miriam to become purified, we need to remain positioned in one place in order to establish a camp concept. And now, once you have a camp, outside of the camp is where Miriam is in isolation. So if we continue traveling with Miriam and we say, Miriam, I know you want to get purified, but we will do it soon. We want to get to the next step, to the next stopover, which means Miriam would get a chance to become purified, but later, a week later, 2 weeks later, as long as they're going to get to the next stop. Would there be anything wrong with that? Not majorly wrong. The only thing which would have been Miriam's state of purity would be delayed. So really what Miriam got, what she really received, if we analyze that from that point of view, the real reward for Miriam was what? That her purity was hastened instead of being delayed. By the fact that everybody decided to remain at our position, not continuing the travel, having a state of a machane, of a camp, so Miriam can be outside of the camp to regain the purity. What did it achieve? It achieved that Miriam's purity is taking place now instead of later. So it lessened the time of her impurity. That's really what happened to Miriam. Says the Rabbi. Now you understand why it happened, because what did Miriam do? Very beautifully. It says as follows. By Miriam's waiting, even though originally she was only one year, there was nobody around, and she was rewarded. How many people waited for you? 600,000 at least, right? With the ark, with Moses, everybody, all the tzaddikim, everybody. When she was standing there, she was the only girl. And by the way, you know, the Talmud analyzes that the time period of waiting, how long do you think Miriam waited there? You look it up later in Sota, page 11. Tosfos explains that she waited 2 opinions, either 15 minutes or 20 minutes. Whole calculation. This is exactly the amount of time until Batya came down and she opened the casket. But what happens when Batya opens the casket? Go back to our story. What does she see? She sees a baby crying. Tries to calm him down. It doesn't calm down. Does not calm down. And what does she say? Oh, he must be Hebrew. he must be a Hebrew. How did she identify as a Hebrew? Circumcised. Okay, what else?
He was crying.
Because he was crying. How do you identify a baby, a Jewish boy crying? She saw him crying. Baby Jewish boys, you only see them crying. One day we'll come to my house, we'll show you a baby boy. I hope that's not your inspiration because they cry. You can hear them cry too. What what is that? What did she see? There's some beautiful Hasidic insights into it. One of them is that a Jewish cry is a cry with hope. It's not a cry of hopelessness. There's a Goyish cry and there's a Jewish cry. A Goy cry, world is over. Not over. You cry because it hurts. But there is hope that things are going to change. That's one Hasidic insight. A Yiddish gewein. Another explanation is, this is just in parentheses, that he cried very loud. He cried very loudly. And she was wondering, why is he crying so loudly? He said he must be Jewish because when a Gentile cries, it's not so loud. They just cry for their own pain. When a Jew cries, he reminds himself of everybody else suffering. So it's a very strong cry, including many others in their outcry, etc., etc. But let's get away from the cry. I want to talk about something else. So he's crying. And what happens when he realizes he says he's a Hebrewite? And what happens then? A guru jumps out behind the bush. I can find you a nurse.
Wet nurse.
A wet nurse. And she ends up bringing this woman, very strange, Yocheved. Yocheved is the mother. I found you. So what happened? What happened really was that Moshe's pain was just lessened with a few minutes, because if they would have to go look for a Jewish wet nurse. First of all, I'm sure not many women would volunteer to take care of a baby that may be being blamed by the government. It's their baby and there's connection and end up in jail. People would stay away, being suspicious. Miriam being there hurried the solution of bringing the vet news right here. So what happened? Moshe's pain was lessened. Says the Rebbe, now you see how it works measure for measure. Miriam was lessening the pain of Moshe by waiting to be able to get the nurse as quick as possible. That's what years later she was rewarded, that the Jewish people are waiting for her to become purified as soon as possible, naturally. Nice. Matok. So what did Miriam do? Ultimately, mainly, the fact that Batya came down is already a miracle. But she does, like we said before, she had no idea what she's doing other than the fact that she is not living Moshe alone. She puts herself into Moshe's situation. Moshe, I am not going home. If you are there, I'm there with you. If I can't help, I can't. Maybe something would happen. How many times people just needs us to be there for them, to be present for them, and how many of those times we can't even really help them? They need an amount that we don't have. They need a healing process that we can't provide. They need some advice that it's not in our world. But at the same time, I am there with you. I remember, that's like a few weeks ago, I have a WhatsApp. Rabbi Schlanger, a young rabbi, was shot and killed by a terrible terrorist attack in Sydney, Australia. I don't know Rabbi Schlanger. I don't even know if I ever met him. But I know his father-in-law, Rabbi Ullman, the rabbi in Sydney. I know him very well. Very well. I know him, Rabbis know each other. He's older than me, but I know him. But the whole thing happened, and I'm sitting, it was Sunday morning, I believe, here in Seattle, yes. First day Hanukkah, thinking, so heartbreaking. What can I do? What can I even say? I wrote Rabbi Ullman on his WhatsApp 3 words. I am with you in your pain. I'm not comforting you because how can I comfort you? The body's still lying there on the ground. I can't offer you any solution because you're fighting there. People are still being shot and killed. I can tell you three words. If you're going to read it, and you read it right there. I guess he was skipping his WhatsApp up. It had to be, thank you. That's it. There was nothing else I can say. Sometimes that's what they need to hear. They need to hear that somebody else is still with them. They're not alone. I'm sure he had many people with them. I'm not bragging that I saved, I gave him the courage. But this is what Miriam is teaching us. To be there for somebody, even if we can't help. And like Pirkei Avot says, Lo alecha melacha ligmor. God is not expecting you to finish the job. Let him interfere too. But the same idea we find at least in 2, maybe 3, depends how much time we will have, in further in the Parsha. Let's go on to the next story of the Parsha. Moshe. Moshe is growing up nicely and comfortably in a wonderful house, in a palace called the Palace of Paro. Right? That's where he's being raised. That's what verse 10 says. Vayigdal hayeled. Child grew up, Vatevieu lebas Paroi, and she brought him to Paro's daughter, and he became like his son. Vayil lebein. Vatikra shmoi Moshe. She named him Moshe. Why Moshe? The word Moshe means Meshisiu. I drew him from the water. She was the one who drew Moshe from the water, which is also something so unbelievable. Our Torah acknowledges gratitude. You know that Moshe had a father. We just said before. Even as a bris, he said, he was born circumcised, whatever. Did Moshe have a name? The old Parsha is called Shemot. These are the names. Every person has a name. Every Jew for sure has a name. Did Moshe have a name? He had a name. And the Torah, the Talmud teaches us he had a name of Vigdor, and a name Tuvia. 7 names. Yekutiel. Yeah, all kind of beautiful names. Yet, what is the only name that they remember him forever, even by the Jews, is Moshe, given by Bar's daughter. Why is it so important to remember that name? So I heard different commentaries who say just to be and to show gratitude to Batya. You saved them. You gave it the name. That's the name is going to be remembered. We don't know any other name. We know the name that you gave, not even the mother, not even the father. This is called Hakarat Tov, to be grateful. But anyway, Moshe is being raised and he's in a very comfortable house, right? A very comfortable house. Says verse 11, listen to that. Vayehi vayamim ahem, and it was on those days, Vayigdal Moshe, Moshe grew up, Vayetze Yelechov, and he went out to his brethren. Vayar besivloisom, and he saw their burdens. Who are you going out to? You're living a good life. You have a palace. You have everything taken care of. Says the Torah, no, that's not Moshe. By Moshe, the first thing is, Vayetze Yelechov. He goes out to his brothers. Why is he going out? The Ramban says, Nachmanides says in his commentary, he heard and he realized that this is his brothers, Echav. My brothers, I have to go identify with them. And what did he go out? Vayar. He just went out to see their burdens. He wasn't enslaved. He wasn't enslaved. There was no decree against Moses. He was an exception. And what are you going out? Are you going to help them? Are you going to take away the decree? Are you going to make their life easier? No. But how can I see the home knowing that somebody else suffers? So I am leaving my house. And once I go out, I might not do nothing other than just seeing them. As Rashi says, Nosan Elo Velibo, in English, I think the translation would be, he paid heed with his heart and with his eyes. He paid attention to be there. But I tell these kids just to, they have a whole club downstairs. They can go play there in a nice way. Thank you, Yechiel. He just went out there to see them, to see what they're doing, to see how they're suffering, to feel with them. That's what Vayar means. That's called feeling responsible, even though you're not going to help much. Yes, you got involved. Once you saw something which is very on the line, he got he got involved, and to the point that he had to flee with Egypt. He couldn't remain even in the country. But his initial decision was motivated by one thing: just I cannot sit home and watch television or watch the four walls and read my books when other people are suffering. Vanished. Vanished. Can't do it. I'm gonna sleep with the same two pillows when the other person doesn't have one pillow. I heard, can't identify it, I wasn't in his bedroom, but I heard about somebody, a rabbi in Israel, that from October 7th till recently, when the last living captive was released from captivity in Gaza, he did not sleep on a mattress. Somebody gave me a name of a certain person in Bnei Brak in Israel that's what he did. On October 7th, he brought in the mattress back to his room, and the last hostage came out. I once read a book, I think by Elie Wiesel, who talks about Jews in America during the Holocaust, or an article of him, and he complains bitterly. He says, "Listen, thank God you didn't suffer what we went through. But why did you have to have the same style weddings between 1940 and 1945, knowing that people are suffering in Europe?" An observation. I'm not saying, I'm not taking a side. I'm not saying my opinion. But that was an observation. Yeah, same style wedding. You can reduce epis, a little bit of the music, a little bit of the flowers, a little bit of the dancing, in dedication of identifying with what your brothers and sisters are going through in Europe right now, as you dance and as you sing. This is called Vayetze Lecha Vayar. This is called to see and to walk out. But ultimately, most importantly, this is what I want to come to the conclusion, is how is Moshe being identified as the leader? What message is he getting as being chosen to become the leader? What does the Torah say? He flees Midian. Even during Midian, what does he do? Identifies with girls who are getting attacked by shepherds. Hello, you're a convicted fellow. That's what you're missing. Your name to be on the headlines that you got involved in a fight with shepherds. Doesn't care. He sees people are victims. He stands up for them. This is the rest of the story. Midian. But on and on. Oh, chapter 3. Moshe is now already the shepherd for his son, father-in-law, Yisro. Comes verse 2 and it says, Vayero malach Hashem Elav. An angel of God appeared to him, belabas eish, in a flame of fire, mitoich hasne, within the thorn bush. Vayar and he saw v'ine hasne boyer bo'eish, the thorn bush is burning in fire. V'hasne ineno ukol, but the thorn bush was not being consumed. And Moshe comes over to the bush, and there is where he meets God, and he's becoming the shepherd of Israel. God calls them and he says, don't come too close. Before you come close, on verse 5, Al tikra valom, don't draw near. Shal ne'alecho me'al raglecho, take your shoes off your feet. Because the place upon which you stand is holy. Rashi says, again from the Gemara, why did God have to appear in a burning bush? I mean, you want to show a phenomenon that you are in a tree and the fire is engulfing the tree and the tree doesn't get consumed. You can show the same phenomenon in an apple tree and in an orange tree and in all kinds of trees. Why does it have to be in a thorn? So Rashi says, God shows Moshe, you saw you people suffering. I am part of it. If they are suffering, I am in the midst of thorns. You're not going to find me in the roses now. Now I'm in the thorns. I am placing on myself a state of pain, just like my children now. And then he tells Moshe, take off your shoes. Very interesting that the Ramban, all the commentaries understand, like the simple reading of the verse indicates that the removing the shoes has to do with the sanctity of the place. Sometimes a place is holy, like in the Bet HaMikdash. You don't want to separate the holiness of the place with the physical being of the person, so you take off your shoes. You are directly positioned upon it. But the Kli Yakar, also a classic commentator over 500 years ago in Prague, wrote a book called Olelot Ephraim, I saw, and he talks on the section of Yom Kippur. He talks about Yom Kippur, removing your shoes on Yom Kippur. And in that place, he brings something very interesting. It says that removing the shoes to Moshe is when a person walks on the road, as long that he wears shoes, so he walks over pebbles, over thorns, and he feels comfortable. Nothing was hurting him, nothing bothered him. The shoes create a separation between the person and the pebbles and the sharp little rocks. But what happens when you have no shoes? And every little rock gives you a good stock. Oh, ah, ah. What do you mean? You just walked with a crock over it and you were quiet. Well, something separated between the rocks and my feet. Now I'm stepping on it. I forgot my rubber shoes at home, and I'm trying to get into the water, and I'm stepping over foot, and the feeling, right? We all went through it at some point in our life. Says the Kli Yakar, Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu, you're going to become the next leader. That's how it works. You're in the thorns together with them, number one, and there's no more shoes. Every pebble you're going to feel. Every sharp rock is going to hurt you. The only way you're going to become a leader and be the right leader is if you can identify and sympathize with the pain and the needs of your people. There was a great rabbi in Poland. He was from Lithuania originally. They called him Reb Elie Chaim, Elio Chaim. What was his last name? He was the rabbi of Lodz. Lodz was a famous city in Poland. He was a rabbi there for 30 years. And he was also very involved in assisting and helping his community members. There was unfortunately poverty too in every place, like always. And it was in the winter. And he was raising funds to be able to provide fuel, wood. Those days, to get fuel, you had to go raise money for it. You couldn't just come into to Venezuela and pick it up, as many barrels you want. It was you had to work hard for it. So anyway, he comes and he's knocking on doors of people of means, trying to ask them for some money to help the needs of the poor. And this wealthy man comes out with a thin robe in a warm house, standing by the door, says, Rebbe, come in. second before I come in. I'm here for a very serious cause. What's going on? We gotta have wood. There's many families, widows, orphans. They really can't afford to pay for the heat. Come in, come in. We'll talk. No, 1 second, let me tell you. And he goes on and explains them and uses all kinds of scenarios and descriptions of the suffering and the crumpling of the people in the cold and in the frost. Let they come in. Now, freezing here. Eventually, he comes in, sits down, he takes out his checkbook in front of the heater, and he writes, Rabbi Elchaim, a wonderful, good amount of money, Rabbi, take. And he gives it to him and says, Rabbi, I want to ask you, why did you keep me by the door? Why couldn't you see I'm ready to help you? I'm ready to help you. I was happy to help you. Why did you keep standing by the door? And the Rebbe says, were you planning to give me this amount? No. But once you felt a little of the cold that everybody else feels, so you're able to identify with that, that obviously helped to raise the value of what you are ready to give, because now you know what I'm talking about. And that's why I wanted you to stay there, to be there by the door. So you should feel, you should recognize, you should have a little understanding what our people are going through. And this is what Hashem is telling Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe, yes, you want to meet up, meet you at a nice garden with roses and talk about the suffering of Egypt. Obviously, you would have trusted me because I'm God, telling you that we need you, so you might take the position. But see, from the time they went down to Egypt, I positioned myself in a thorn bush, poking myself, feeling what they feel. And I want you to feel the same. Take off your shoes. Don't walk with shoes. Step on those pebbles. Feel and identify with what they go through. That all came a part of what Moshe himself had experienced when he was put into the Nile River by his sister Miriam. That's exactly what Miriam did. She just stood there. I'm not going just to live on my comfortable life. I am positioning myself. At some point, I'm sure she would have gone home. And like I said before, the longest she stood there, according to the opinion of Tosfos, is 20 minutes. But she was ready to stand there 20 hours, maybe. And she will eventually go home. You can't keep on living like that. And who knows how things will develop. But they developed the way it developed because that's what Miriam was. She really inherited it from her grandfather Levi. The Medrash says that Levi, it says by Levi something interesting. When the Torah lists the names of all the tribes, so which is in Parshas Vayigash 2 weeks ago, so it says Eile Shmois Bnei Yisrael. It says these are the children Bnei Reuven, Bnei Shimon, Bnei Levi. I'm sorry, not here. Just a second. Hold on 1 second. No, it's actually in this big part. Where is it? Oh, later in the Parsha. Hold on. Oh, yeah. Next week's Parsha. The Torah goes on to names again. The Torah says, Bnei Reuven, Chanoch, Palu, Bnei Shimon, Yemuel, Yamin. Very interesting names. Oad, Yachin, Tzochar. Then it says on verse 16, Ve'ele Shmod Bnei Levi. And these are the names of Levi's sons, Gershon, Kehat, Umrari. And the Medrash is wondering, why doesn't it say, and these are the names of Reuven's sons, and these are the names of Shimon's sons? It says, Reuven's sons is so-and-so. Shimon's sons is so-and-so. Comes to Levi, here it says, Ve'ele Shmo is Bnei Levi, and these are the names. Like, what is the special announcement to Levi. The Medrash says because Levi, even though he was not enslaved in Egypt, the Torah wants to make a special emphasis. And these are the names of his sons, because the 3 sons he had were named names which specifically identify the suffering of his brothers. He is not part of the suffering. He was Levi, right? He was given permission to sit in Goshen and live in a more relaxed life. But yet, when he gave birth to his sons, to his children, he named them names which he should remember always that not everybody is having it good. As the Medrash says, Gershon. Why is Gershon called Gershon? Remember, Moshe also called the name Gershon. Gei Raiti, I'm a stranger in a foreign country. Kehat comes from the word Sheneim Kehot. It says that their teeth were Hake Yeshinov. What is it called in Agada? Bluntest teeth? What does it say there? Yes. But the wicked man, what do you do to his teeth? Hake Yeshinov. What does it translate in English? In the Agada, there are 4 sons. Comes to the wicked, what does it say? What should you do to them? Something with the teeth? You don't remember? You're thinking about the Knedlach already? Merori. What's Merori? Comes from what word? Maror, embittering their life. Levi's sons were named with names which constantly will remind them that his brothers are in pain. That's the names. They're the names of Levi's sons. Again, that's where the granddaughter Miriam got it from. I'm not living, I'm not identifying, I'm going to be there and try to do the best I can. I can't do much, but you can sympathize. You can wait. You can be present. That's what it's all about. Let them know that you're there. Let them know that you're there for them. That you're together with them in it. They're not alone. Very important. That's what it is. That's what the first story I told you, the Rabbi Marash. He had to change his clothes after meeting an hour of people because he heard, he listened, he identified with them. And he took it to heart. He started sweating once, twice. Eventually, he had to change his clothes after an hour. That's what happens. No, we should be able to identify with each other's joyful occasions, God willing, with each other's joyful celebrations, with each other's good news. When the brother is happy, be happy there for them and with them. Let them know that they are not alone. You are happy with them. That will be the best. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, Rabbi.
Have a wonderful Sunday. What does it say? Rabbi Yitzchak. Koletsky. What? Yes. What is it? Oh, it slept on the floor or on a board since October 7th massacre. How can I sleep comfortably? Oh, you see, everything is in the news.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're very welcome. Good night, young people. Only good news.
Okay.
Meirke, I woke you up.
I was hiding from you.
Very good. I identify with you.
Okay.
Have a good rest. I'll see you on Shabbat. All the best. Thank you.